And I hate snakes, and we were down in Crowell, North Carolina, and I could feel those things slithering between my leg. And they were firing live ammo over our heads, and I said, hey, you know. But I endured, and they didn't bother me, the snakes, and I didn't raise my head, so I'm here to tell you about what happened after that. I got assigned to USS LST-27, and I said to myself, what in the heck is an LST, you know? And we boarded in Norfolk, Virginia. I carried my sea bag, along with the rest of the graduates from boot camp, up this long gangway, and this was the biggest vessel I've ever seen in my life. You know, if you head up here in Lake George, it's 327 foot long, envision that, 50 foot wide. That's a big ship.
Now, what's LST stand for?
Landing ship tanks.
Landing ship tanks. So, what was that capacity supposed to be for the landings in Normandy?
Well, we landed, what we did, we carried small boats. We sent the small boats in first, loaded with troops and vital supplies.
And then you turned around and went back?
Then we stayed there. We supported, when it was, we were able to, we came in with the LST then and opened the bow doors and dropped the ramp. But at the time, not even the small boats could get in among the obstacles with mines all over the place. They were killing our soldiers like sheep, you know, slaughtered and slaughtered. But we left Norfolk in March of 1944 and landed in Africa, and we had gone through a bad air raid by the Germans in the Mediterranean and U-boat attack, in which we survived. And one ship was hit and set afire. It was a ship carrying lumber, and incidentally, the Coast Guard put the fire out within a couple of hours. It was at the stern of our convoy. I almost lost my life there. I didn't tell you this previously. I was a loader on a 20mm all the time, AA gun. And,
what's an AA gun?
It's an anti-aircraft gun, 20mm, and it was obsolete now, but then it was a pretty good gun. But it was pretty accurate. It was made in Sweden. And I was about to get another magazine and load when a bomb landed on our port side, a near miss, and swung our LST over to starboard. And I was going through into the dark Mediterranean with that magazine in my hand. And I said, boy, there goes Leone. You're gone. And Kistner, the aimer, grabbed me by the back of my K-Pock life jacket and pulled me back. And that was close. That was my first baptism of fire right there. The German. I was 18 years old, screaming, hysterical, shaking a fist. And if a real German had popped up in front of me on the deck, I probably would have fainted dead away. Yeah, really. You're scared. You know, heroes are heroes, but most of them are scared.
So that was an airplane attack?
That was Luftwaffe. Yeah, Ju-88s and the Dorniers come in, torpedo bombers. And what we did, we succeeded in almost completely obliterating a British anti-aircraft cruiser on our port side, and I think some of the guys did it deliberately. They didn't care for the British too much at the time. They knocked their radar out. Yeah. But that's something. That's a story I don't wish to go into. But we sailed from Africa. We reached Africa without further incident, and sailed. We headed for England, and we landed in Swansea, Wales. We got liberty, and we unloaded an LCT. And an LCT is it's a wide, flat box, sort of a landing craft, where the ramp drops down and the conning tower is in the back. And we had one on top side. We carried that piggyback. And what we did was fill the starboard bilge, the tanks, ballast tanks, with water, so it would have a list on the starboard side. And then chop the cables holding the LCT on. The LCT was mounted on skids, greased wooden skids. And they severed the cables, and the thing would land in the water with a big splash. We got rid of that thing. We were glad to get rid of it, really, because in heavy seas we were top heavy, and we had no keels to speak of, 8-foot updraft.
Now, is that what would land the men later on?
Yeah, indeed. That same one, as a matter of fact, went in there and lost it. And from there we went to Southampton, and then Falmouth. Falmouth, we became part of the B backup force for D-Day, and that was the end of May. And we took on units of the 175th Infantry, which is belonged to the 29th Division. And we were everything was frozen. We couldn't move.
Now this is about what date?
This was the end of May, for about a week before D-Day.
So you're getting ready for the Great Invasion.
Yeah, we were sealed off. area was sealed off. We couldn't go on liberty. We couldn't talk to the British girls, and that was a sacrifice in those days, believe me, because they were all over the Yanks. We were like the invention of sliced bread. You know, they couldn't get enough of the Yanks. But the Yanks had a lot of money, I guess, and they showed up the British servicemen pretty badly, and their behavior was abominable.
Who's?
The American troops over there, and and the British treated them real good. The Americans, they were spoiled. They had a lot of money and very loud, gregarious. And, you knew they were around. It's the old story. And but they sealed us off, and I think it was the 4th or 5th we were ready to go, and we ended up. We headed toward Piccadilly Circus. That was the name of the circle. It comes back to me in the middle of the channel where we were supposed to rendezvous. And then the flotillas would go toward the British beachhead, and we were supposed to go toward the American beachhead, Omaha and Utah Beach.
So just a second, y'all went out to see, let's say the 5th, was it?
It was real stormy, yeah, bad.
And they're going to rendezvous.
The 4th, it was the 4th, I think it was earlier than that.
Okay.
It was real bad.
And the British, and they had to call it off, right?
Real bad, yeah. They called it off, and Eisenhower was really blown away about it, and they waited, and I guess, I think it was a British meteorologist that saw a break, a window in the weather, and Eisenhower decided to go for it. You know, he kept his fingers crossed. He had a letter ready apologizing for the loss of lives and the withdrawal from the continent in case it failed. And so we went, and the first units moved out from Southampton, from London, from British ports out that way, and Plymouth and Portland, and we were the second. We were a backup force from Falmouth. And by the time we got to the beachhead the next day, it was a mess.
This is June 6th now.
This is the 7th.
7th.
And it was a mess. All you saw was a layer of white smoke on the beach. And the Americans had got off the beach by late on June the 6th. The Rangers had got in behind the Germans. But we were there, it was still hot, mines all over the place. And of course they had these tetrahedrons and stakes driven in the ground with teller mines sitting on them. And at high tide, they'd come in, you couldn't see them. And our LCVPs had to negotiate between them. And, this was impossible at high tide. You had to wait till the tide was way out. And then the soldiers had to walk almost half a mile on bare ground. You know, nothing, no foliage or anything. And of course the Germans mowed them down like wheat field. And as I said before, there was a German private set there with a machine gun just killing Americans and crying when he was doing it. Please go back, I don't want to kill no more. And they kept feeding them into the battle. And at one point, General Bradley was going to pull them off, take all the people at Omaha Beach and bring them over to Utah. And which Utah was a pretty successful landing. The casualties almost negligible at the time. And we came in with the LSTs. We'd already launched our LCVPs and brought in supplies and troops.
What's LC?
LCVP, that's Landing Craft Vehicle Personnel. It's a Higgins boat. It was invented by Higgins, the boat builder in the United States. And then it was our time for us to come in and unload the tanks. And as we came in, as we started to move in, it was pretty hard to negotiate because the mined obstacles were still all over the place. There were pieces of human bodies floating all over. American soldiers, they had the life belts on that you activate them, they blow up, and you press the cartridge, CO2 cartridge. And what it did, they had a heavy pack on, it would upend them and drown them. They couldn't get loose. And we see a lot of the soldiers floating that way. Their life belts worked all right, but it killed them. And the bodies floated to and fro all day long, I guess. So we came in and we were moving, and on the conning tower, our officers had barricaded themselves behind a pile of mattresses up on the bridge. You know, not that they were chicken, they were just being, smart about the whole thing. They don't want to get hit with shrapnel. So, and as we proceeded in, the bow lookout yelled, "Wreckage in the water, dead ahead." We stopped. And it was apparently an LCT had been hit earlier and was laying there. And had we gone another 25 or 30 feet, we would have been impaled, practically stuck on the thing. We couldn't move. So we kind of backed off and motioned the LST following us in line to go around. And when they did, they went around us, and as they made that move, it blew right in half a mine. And you can get a picture of a huge structure like an LST. It's 327 foot long, steel, welded steel, 50 foot wide, blowing in two. And the crew on board that had a motley assortment of pets. They had pigeons, chickens. What the hell would you have a chicken on board for? I don't really eat it. They had chickens and dogs and cats. And you know, this is strictly forbidden, really, but they let them get away with this. We were the Suicide Navy, he called us. It's a very apropos title. When I blew up, there were no chickens, there were no nothing. They were just, these guys went hurtling through the air, and they were fully loaded with soldiers. And most of them died. In fact, the wreckage is still there. It was on the 50th anniversary program. You saw it, Belly. They said something about the wreckage being there off of Point de Hoc. But now they're coming in. Then we proceeded to go in. After we saw that, we weren't too enthusiastic about going in and hit the beach. As this is going to happen here, what's going to happen when you get up there? Even though it was a day later. And we started to move in, and we were all armed to the teeth. We had our clothing was all impregnated with chemicals to withstand the gas attack. And when your body got hot, that stuff would itch, would drive you crazy. And we had that on. We were all ready to go. Our life jackets and helmets. I was manning a 20 millimeter, and in we went. And all of a sudden, the PA crackled, and I heard the damnedest noise. And that scared me more than the enemy, really, at first when it came on. Mares, the oaks, and oaksy goats, and little lambs, he divey, kiddly divey too. It was the voice of our skipper. He was dead drunk. To the Portuguese fella. Very solemn-looking individual. Black, dark. You know. In fact, you couldn't see him. We called him the Shadow at night. He'd walk on the bridge, and all you'd see was a glow of his cigarette. And he let it burn to his lip, and he'd spit it out. You know. He was fearless. Here's a guy that's fearless. He's singing "Mares the Oaks." I would have chosen a different tune, really, but everybody burst out laughing. But then, about that time, it was a morale builder in a sense, because it told us that the captain was human after all, and he was just as much afraid as we were. So we went in. We hit the beach. Started up the ventilating fans. We had big tubes coming on the tank deck, and it sucked the exhaust fumes out. And incidentally, most of the vehicles seemed to be burning oil all the time. I don't know why. It was poor maintenance, but anyway, they got them going. And the trucks were towing. This was the 175th Anti-Tank Company. It was part of the 29th Division, and they started to move out when the brake locked on the tank, anti-tank gun in the back, the lead truck. And Marion Burroughs, a friend of mine, was on it. And he says, "God, that saved my life, that brake locking up like that. That's the way things happen, you know." And he said, "I motioned the other truck to back me around, and he was an Army wrecker used for picking up tanks or wrecked vehicles, went around. And both the vehicles went out, and another one too, I think it was, and they hit a mine just coming off the ramp to our starboard looking. And I still think they went off the taped area. They had it taped off where it was safe, you know, where the mines were, to distinguish between the mined and unmined areas. And it blew up, and there was bodies all over the place, and the trucks were filled with Chesterfield cigarettes, old golds. I remember them vividly. And the Lucky Strike had gone to war. They'd taken the green out of the cigarette wrapper to save the cadmium, I think was the green. And cigarettes were all over the place, dummy bazooka shells, and the thing was loaded with ammo and gasoline. And it went up, and it was a flaming cauldron. It was just like a blast furnace. And these poor guys were screaming in there. And a few of them were pinned under the frames, and you could see the rubber of the tires melting, turning liquid, dripping. Their screams, it seemed like they screamed long after life left their body. I can still hear them, really, sometimes. You know, it's just that if you ever heard a person screaming in agony when they were being burned, well, you can think of a cat. They pour gasoline on some part of it. So the screams were terrible. And we went out and see what we could do. I raced down. I got a piece of shrapnel through the top of my helmet. Cut it open, and broke some skin, and I didn't realize it until the thing fell off my head and landed on the deck, and I went down and see what I could do to help. And you couldn't get near the thing. The fire flames were so hot, and a couple of individuals did go out though and rescued somebody. And I went out to get another helmet. I needed another helmet the worst way, and they were all over the place like coconuts. I see one with netting on. I went out to get it, and zing, 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 the sand, spurts of sand right in front of it. There's some German that probably anticipated my move and said, well, this guy's not going to get his helmet. But one of our officers, a deck officer, a little fellow named Surf, he went out and dragged somebody back to the ship. And they'd always made fun of him because of his size. He was puny. He was like another Don Knotts. Remember Don Knotts? Same thing. Nervous.
Barney Fife.
Yeah, Barney Fife. And the officers would pick on him, make him stand on a table because he was Jewish and things like that. You know, that was World War II. Things were different. Colored steward, he'd have to stand on the back of the bus, even though he survived a lot of battles. He'd have to stand on the back of the bus in Norfolk. And this is what World War II was all about. And he went out, Lieutenant Surf, and he yelled, "Are you crazy?" So forth and so forth. He got him back. I think he got the silver, some medal for a Silver Star or something. But you know, he was 10 foot tall in our eyes after that. But there were one medic, Dr. Chingolani. He's a friend of mine now. He was a medic at the time, and he belonged to the Foxy 29 medical team. They were a medical team assigned to all the landing ships, like LSTs, and they were composed of 1 or 2 naval doctors with a team of corpsmen. And I had another name for corpsmen. I don't want to repeat it here at being school. But we had a surgical operating station in the back of, in the rear of the tank deck. There was a complete operating room, and we operated on the wounded there. And at times we'd go back to eat, and we set our trays down on the dining room. They'd operate on the tables there on the men, and our trays would slide in the blood and stick to them. And you know, you talked about appetizing. Well, you know, you didn't feel much like eating after that. And well, anyway, to get back to the burning trucks. Finally, somebody else closed the damn bow door, so we lifted the ramp. It takes ages for that thing to come up on chains, and we closed the bow. Waited till the fire subsided, the flames went down, and we went out. And you know, we kind of hate to see what was out there, but things were still hot. The tires were burned. Everything was gone. There was just bones sitting there grinning and skeletons. And we started to unload. The fellows of the 175th took off with the trucks and the anti-tank guns, and they didn't cast one eye toward the human barbecue, I call it, that's what it was, and they looked the other way. They were, unbeknownst to them, they were heading into a bad battle with the Germans up the same low. The 352nd Infantry Division wasn't supposed to be there, but it was, and it hit them. And so then we started carrying wounded back. We became sort of a hospital ship. We made many, many trips back and forth across the channel. Our tank deck had stretchers and metal things that clipped in. You hung the beers on or stretchers on, and we had a lot of wounded. And among the wounded, we had the enemy and our own troops together. So we didn't differentiate. When it came to surgery, they were treated the same, believe it or not. This is the way the American mentality works. I don't think the German mentality worked that way at the time, but we treat everybody the same. And one German boy, he couldn't have been more than 13 or 14, had his arm blown off up to here. You know, a contraction thing on a splint. And I was out there feeding the prisoners, and I came to him, and I had a can of cream chicken where you heated up the can on top, and it heated up, and I proceeded to get a spoonful and hold it toward his mouth, and he took it in his mouth and he spit it all over me. You know, he was a Nazi, Hitler Youth. He was only 12, 13 maybe, I think. And about that time, I was going to take the 45 out and kill him. I felt like doing it, really. And the fellow next to him, a German prisoner, was my age. And my God, he looked twice as old as I did. His hair was gray. He'd been through apparently a lot, an awful lot. And he was a member of that 352nd Infantry Division up there. And they'd been through bombing from the air. They couldn't come out in daylight. Our planes would hit them with rockets, knock out their tanks, and their tanks would have to move by night. You know, they couldn't move in the day. And German Tiger tanks were notorious for bearings failing. They were awful heavy. Even though one Tiger tank would knock out 10 of our Shermans. Our Shermans were junk, really. And the older fella, 18-year-old, same age as me, he was old enough to be my father at the time. He said, you must forgive him. He lost his parents in Berlin. The American air attacks killed his parents, and his entire regiment was wiped out. He's alone. He said, your mortar got him. So right now he went like this. well, that's the universal sign anything. So I left the kid alone. I often worried about it and wondered what happened. You know, here's an enemy again. But at the time, we hated the Germans. We had the Germans aboard that slaughtered the GIs in Normandy during the Battle of the Bulge. We took them back to the States Island, and they were on the double guard. But the crew was all trying to get at them to kill them. In fact, one of the crew had relatives in the army who was a prisoner of the Germans. And, you know, there were bad feelings.
They don't know that story, these kids.
No, they don't. Normandy.
How many Americans were killed? They surrendered, and the Germans killed.
What is it called?
Normandy. It was during the Battle of the Bulge.
Yeah, they machine gunned them.
After
Quite a
they
few
surrendered.
survived, though.
Yeah.
70 or 80 Americans, or 60, 70, I know, saw it.
But they transported these people back to the States, the Germans?
We transported them back to England for trial. And, boy, you want to see them. They were different. They were not the typical German prisoner. They were arrogant.
Yeah.
They were selected for their height, blue eyes, blonde hair, and they looked down on us. They did.
Hitler's elite, the ones who were brainwashed.
Yeah, the SS, they were bad news. They had the death's head symbol, a symbol of a skeleton on their caps. And all night long we had double watch on them. There were guards, MPs, double guards with machine guns. The crew was trying to get to them. All night long. I couldn't sleep. I'll tell you right now. You know, it's gee, I mean, that's a straight bullet, right? Who wants to sleep with something like that going on? And we carried a lot of wounded back and forth. A Coast Guardsman, one of the first casualties we got aboard was, he was off Coast Guard LST 21 or 16. And he was a coxswain of an LCBP, bringing in the soldiers, and he hit a mine. Blew both legs off. And they brought him on our LST and put him on the operating table. He died probably an hour later. He didn't have a chance. Then he brought in a Navy officer. His LCBP got blown sky high, and he didn't have a scratch on it. An ensign. He had a few Navy guys, and the other guys were bad. And this is what we got all day long. We got British paratroopers, we got English flyers, American flyers, casualties. Before we hit the beach, they were coming aboard. They were bringing them out to us in rhinos. The rhinos was like a pontoon with an outboard motor on it. And they put them on that and bring them out in LCBPs too. And for a long time, we didn't sleep at all. All you'd hear was the groans of the wounded and the screams of the dying and in pain and the gurgling of the dead. And, you know, you'd notice those most of all. And they'd have that vacant look in their eyes like they'd left this world and gone. And I guess the only thing about that was they didn't have the pain anymore to contend with. But hey, I was 18 years old. You know, I shouldn't be there. What the hell? Place, quality time, no way. You know. But I wouldn't have it any other way because, as I pointed out before, he has a copy of Studs Terkel's book, The Good War. It was a good war. We had our fleet sunk at Pearl Harbor. You know. And what would you do if somebody's coming in your house, grab your family? You have to fight, and therefore it was a good war. We was against our cause. I fought against my own relatives in Italy. And I should mention that here, because that's another subject altogether I can talk about for 25 years, and that's it. But the Italians, we got Italian prisoners aboard too, incidentally, who worked in our galley, helped. They loved to cook, and as soon as they saw the ovens aboard, they went crazy. They thought of pizza probably originally, but at once. But we let them loose. They were enemies. We let them loose. The Italians, you're running around. The Germans didn't like that. Why you're not talking? The Italians weren't going anywhere. They were big lovers. They were not fighters, you know. And I know from experience. And we had them aboard, but we had the dead on the fantail. And I think the most horrible thing that happened to me next to that, the truck's pulling up. I was on the bow watch. I was usually the bow watch. I had good eyes. I was especially trained in aircraft identification. And I got a call over the intercom, over the phones. He said, the cox wants to see you on the fantail, Joe Moroni. He said, the guy from your hometown wants to talk to you. Well, before we've gone in and hit the beach, I talked to a second Louis from my hometown. He said, if anything ever happens to me, go see my parents. And I said, you'll be all right, don't worry about it. Well, I got that call and I went back, and he said, go back on the fantail. So I went back on the fantail, it's a stern, and dark, it was dark, just starting to get dark. And Joe Moroni says, there's your good friend from Utica right there, and he propped this dead lieutenant up I talked to. This is the mentality at the time, the sickness. You guys were sick to do something like that. They propped him up, pulled the blanket back, his face was bloody, or a sniper hit him in the head. This is the same second lieutenant. His mother fellow owned a clothing store in Utica. Kessler, his name was. About that time, I went nuts. And I went after those guys. They were running and laughing. It was a joke. This is the kind of mentality you got to contend with. And when you live with people like that, it's not a good time. And you sleep with people like that. They come back drunk, bragging about all their victories with the girls, you know, and I think their brains were where the sun won't shine, really. A lot of violence. One guy went crazy. We were anchored up in Rouen after D-Day, bring troops up there, and a guy had been drinking Calvados. It was a cider made, an apple cider made locally in Normandy, and this is why they call it the Calvados region. It was a very potent drink. It would really knock you out if you weren't used to it. And he had his gut full of it. And I lay there watching him. I didn't trust the little son of a anyway, a little Frenchman. Leclerc, his name was. And I lay there, and all of a sudden he had his eyes turned red. You know, crazy. He went after me with his knife. He was slashing at me, jumping on me. Why me? I don't know. But he cut this right foot right open, right through the shoe. I got a big scar there. And it took about 20 of us to get him down. And you know what he got out of the punishment? He had a captain's mast, and he was tried for deleterious action. Deleterious behavior. He tried to kill me, deleterious behavior. But he probably needed men desperately, I don't know. I would have shot him, you know, really, because he tried to kill me. That was pure and simple. And this is what you lived with every day. You lived with the wounded, the dying. But death became a way of life. And that's bad, that's bad. And when I got discharged from the service, I got 100% disability. I was a basket case. I had insulin shock treatment once or twice. They wiped out my memory, and I've written several books based on my diaries. If I didn't have diaries, I would never recall any of the things that happened. I have in my possession the declassified deck logs of the ship, minute by minute, the things that happened. And some of these officers didn't have time to mark anything down, believe me, so it's not that accurate. And then the other fellows sent me their diaries, and of course they got a complimentary copy of my latest book. I gave the book free, you know, because it gave me a part of their lives. And I spent 10 years in the VA hospital, outpatient treatment. I'm still going there in Albany, you know. But I'd do it all over again, because it was a cause celebrity, you want to say. And it's nothing like it's going on today, and war itself should be abolished, it should be outlawed. Because there can't, conceivably, no winners, you can't. No one would win a nuclear war, would they? You know, just bad. Then, it was a different thing altogether. It was bad enough, you know. You see men die all the time. It's not a pleasant sight. I hate to see right now today a dog die. A dog got hit by a car, so I die. I feel badly, you know. But to see a human being die and then get used to it and inure yourself and say, this is a way of life, I have to live with it. That crew became my family for 2 years. The only home I had. Of course, the British families adopted me kind of. I used to bring them Spam, which everybody dumped overboard, and they hated it. I'd bring them Spam, and they'd fix a nice meal out of it. And they were very, they felt, you know, we were very generous, because it was junk, and nobody liked Spam. But the time I spent, the V1s and V2s came over after D-Day in England, and my God, that was bad. I see men, women, and children get hit with them. The V1s would come over, the robot bombs, and as long as you heard the pulse jets running, you knew that you were always safe. But when you heard a silence, you know the precessing gyro shut off, the fuel supply was gone, and it was going to drop.
V1, V2, they were basically missiles that weren't piloted by human beings. And it was first used right at the end of World War II by the Germans towards the end, right?
Yep, right after, well, after D-Day they started.
And they launched them towards, in England, right?
They launched them toward England, and they were a terror weapon. They weren't very accurate.
Yes?
Is Chris Mount there?
Yes?
Would you have him come to the office for a message at the end of the period, please?
Okay.
Okay.
And the V1s come over, Hudson Fall missiles, they had 3,600 miles an hour. But you couldn't hear them coming, but their damage wasn't as widespread. They had, you know, they didn't make a big deep crater. But between the two, one family was wiped out in Southampton. I know a girl and her family, and I took the tram out there, and their house was not only gone, the whole block was gone where V1 hit. And a pub owner I knew, an old fella, I used to stay after hours, and I go out with some of the beasts, they call it girls over there. They had a lot of prostitutes around. And so I'd linger around, and this old man and his wife would play darts. And they were a nice couple, you know, like a fatherly, motherly thing. And they got hit and fell off. I think it was a V1 or V2 God, I forgot which it was, but there was a sign on the door, and it was a black mourning thing. And, you know, little by little it chipped away at you, and families were decimated. Men, women, children would die in their own homes. And there was no defense against these damn things. The British, I'd see British fighters go up, the Spitfires, and the very brave men would go over the channel. When the V1s would come in, the robot planes, they'd try to hit. Can you imagine doing that? Hit them, going 200-300 miles an hour, tipping the wings of the robot bombs to get them off course so they drop in the channel. Half the time they were, pretty near half the time they were successful. The rest of the time they were going to hit somebody, but they were protecting their families. You'd feel the same way.
They were actually hitting.
Yeah, they touch the
rockets
wings.
with the plane.
Yeah, they touch with their wings, just enough to nudge it. Well, you got to be good to do that. But what was at stake? Their families. In the Battle of 39 and 40 and the Battle of Britain, when they defeated the Luftwaffe, the RAF had a cause, and you know they had to do something, and they defeated the Luftwaffe, which was a lot stronger. To get back to the war business, so I spent a lot of years after the war in VA hospitals, and it wasn't quality time, and a lot of my friends are still in there, and Beansy, the fellow that got hit on D-Day, the member of the engineers, who I didn't know got hit until after the war, and he lost part of his face and his arm, died 1996 in the Canandaigua Mental Hospital. He'd been there since World War II. Last time I saw him, we both cleaned the bar room out when the bartender shortchanged Beansy. Beansy gave him a $20 bill, and he said, "No, you didn't, you give me a 10, and about that time, he and I went after everybody and smashed everything. And
That was after the war, right?
After the war, and the lingering effects, you know, trauma. And there were a lot of cases like that, and a lot of guys never recovered. You know. And I'm sure Vietnam veterans are much worse because he went through a different kind of a thing than you did. But as a spokesman for war, forget it. You know, there's no way to solve an argument. In fact, there's no way to solve an argument with fists, because it only leads to worse things. War is one thing that you keep in the back of your mind. There are no winners. And when you see little men, women, and children getting killed, innocent victims getting killed, the French were not happy to see us when we hit Normandy. We wiped out half of them to liberate them. We killed their men, women, children. One little girl, 5 years old, sat in the doorway of her farmhouse, gazing vacantly at the horizon. Nobody left. And who were the people that did this to her? Our battle wagons, the big shells, when they were like, they sounded like a locomotive, you know, landed, and indiscriminately, what can you do? A bullet has no conscience, and it hit, and it killed a lot of Frenchmen. And the Frenchmen weren't happy, and some of the French girls were married to German officers, and they had started families. And so things were kind of cozy until we hit there and deliberated. And that's a tough thing to say, because we weren't well liked at first. And later on, we started getting the medals after they realized that we liberated the continent. You know. But when you see girls, you know, young, pretty French girls, wave to the American soldiers going through a village and then shoot them in the back when they pass, because they were sleeping with a German officer or married to them with 4 children. And I see one day the paratroopers marching down to the beach and hung one of the girls with a wire around her neck, and just pulled it, their atoms in her, went like the air and rushed. Very pretty girl. And they took the rest behind a sand dune and shot him. And the paratroopers had been treated badly by the Germans when they descended. They cut them up, sliced up their most sensitive parts you can think of, you know, and left them hanging there in the trees. So, you know, it's atrocities. And like I say, the best argument against war is no war. Mediate, involve.
Well, Mr. Leone, I'm really glad you could come here today. Your time's just about up, but I want to thank you again.
I'm going to India and Pakistan next. So.
That's where they leave.
It's been fun, you know, explaining things.